the director of the Communications Center at Rio Grande, and I'm a PhD from Purdue who went to the Karen Pryor Academy that looks at how do you train animals of all kinds to do all kinds of things. With us today for the second time is Nolan Crabb. Nolan has a service dog, a seeing eye dog. Nolan is the Director of Assistive Technology at The Ohio State University, and he's had his dog Carl for about, I think, 3 years. Is that right, Nolan?
Actually, he's 3 years old. He and I have been together about 16 months.
We need audio for Nolan. We'll get that here. So I'm going to say a few things here along the way. With service dogs, they accomplish such incredible things. They are doing things that owners rely on for their safety on a day-to-day basis every time they have that dog in harness and put their hand on that harness and have the dog lead. They appear to do things that are almost impossible that seem magic. So by understanding how service dogs are trained and how they work, we're also going to see then, and you'll be surprised that some of the things you may learn from a modern dog trainer are also the foundations of training for a service dog. Now let's just check. Do we have audio with Nolan?
I hope so. I'm here.
We're good. You are there.
All right.
All right. And Nolan, you've had your dog Carl for about 3 years. Is that right? Or
actually, it's 16 months. He is 3 years old.
All right, and he's 3 years old.
Correct.
And your dog was trained in New York State, and
he was.
And did his city training in Manhattan.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about some of the amazing things that your dog does, some of the things you've taught your dog to do, and try to shed some light on how this magic is possible and explain it in such a way that even people who have pet dogs can see how they use some of the training cues that they use with their pet dogs, how these are used even with service dogs to get amazing results. I want to talk a little bit about of the methods of training. Now, guide dog schools have to place a great emphasis on the methods that work best. And the reason why, that's my camera.
Right.
Hello. I'm looking at the other camera.
Right.
Is the red light over there? No, anyway, they have to use
those are on order.
Those are, okay.
They'll be there.
All right. Anyway, they have to use the methods that work best for a bunch of reasons, but they have to get the methods that give the best results in the shortest period of time for the most dogs that can be carried out by most owners. For this reason, they let go of less effective methods that might have been used in the past. Now, each service dog can cost up to $40,000. It depends, but up to $40,000 for training and maintaining that animal's ability to work. Failure to successfully complete training is costly in terms of dollars and time invested in that dog. If an owner cannot carry out the methods that are used to train that dog, then you have an animal whose training deteriorates in the field and they have to be replaced. If an animal makes major errors, that could actually lead to the injury or death of an owner. So now just to kind of get something started here, we have all heard, and Mike, we've all heard this sort of stuff, that in order to effectively train a dog, you have to show the dog who's dominant, who's boss, and that is in some popular ideas, job number one. So I want to ask Nolan a little bit about that. Is that approach how things are done when training service dogs, guide dogs? Or is there a different way of approaching them that you and the schools have, some schools have found to be much better?
Yeah, there was a time when we engaged in what a lot of folks used to call, or like to call, yank and yell, which was a dominance kind of thing where you would use the leash to correct and to very temporarily put some tension on that slip collar and then release it, at the same time issuing very sternly a command to do or not to do something. The schools have very largely gotten away from yank and yell, that dominance and submission thing, and what they teach now is the idea that guide work needs to become a game. So if we can gamify the process for these guys and turn it into fun, something that they love to do, because at the end they get rewards and there's a certain security and a certain satisfaction for these dogs when they achieve something and can correlate in their mind the activity with the reward. And so in recent years, this all started first on the service dog side, and then it made the transition to the guide dog side. In recent years, they've begun literally turning guide work into a bit of a game and using items like a clicker. And I have mine here. I don't quite know how much of it is visible.
Oh, you've got it.
It's
yeah.
good.
And Carl gets really excited when he sees his clicker, because in his head, it's associated with food reward and fun. And so the minute I pulled that out, he stood up earlier as you were introducing, and he was really happy. He thought he's pretty sure we're going to have some game here. We actually are not. The success with the clicker is that you don't fire it off until you get exactly the result you're trying to achieve. So it's changed a lot. We're not worried too much about beating that dog into submission. We're not worried too much anymore about yelling and yelling and yelling and getting some result that way. Nowadays, it's more of a partnership. It's positive reinforcement. It's redirection. We're directing the dog away from a bad behavior and toward a good behavior. And my goodness, if you stop and think about it, some of those techniques even are useful when you raise small children.
Yes.
The best of us
Yeah.
as parents are redirecting the behavior of our children. We're not engaging in yank and yell, as it were.
Yeah, you're good with that up until age 3 or 4 or so, and developmentally
yeah.
dogs are right around in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the good part about the clicker, or the advantage to that, is when the dog displays the behavior, you don't have time to go over and say, hey, that was a good boy. The
Right.
click is right then when you see it.
Yes, that's correct. It creates a very specific link in that dog's mind between the activity and the reward. If I touch that card reader out in front of that door, it's not enough that I bring that blind person up to the door, because I may be facing a whole bunch of glass. I may be facing a circumstance where there's lots and lots of glass windows, and it all looks like it could be a door to me as a dog. So now I have to be taught to look for the door handle, or in some cases, a card reader that the blind person could slide his card through in order to unlock that door. And I get a tremendous charge, quite frankly, out of teaching Carl to find very specific things like card readers. And he already knows. They trained him at the school how to find a door handle. And rarely does he not do that, unless there's lots and lots of glass and the whole thing is extremely confusing. In the case like that, he may just flat, hey, I can't see a door handle here. Sorry, I don't know. Here's the window. But that's pretty rare. That's almost non-existent. It happens, but not often.
So he just leads you to these things and you operate it. He doesn't operate any of these things.
That's correct. He will go to those items and put his nose on them. So I have to, with my right hand, follow down, and wherever his nose is, that's where we want to be.
Okay.
And I've taught him the card reader trick, because some of the buildings I use on campus, I have to use the little card reader to get in and out of, or into them rather. And boy, that is really handy, because it's not always near the door handle. Depends on how they wire it. So it's a wonderful experience to be able to target that particular thing and have him find it, even if it's not near the handle. So, and it's so fun to do. It becomes a game for both of you.
Well, Nolan, let me ask you about the game and the bond you have and that Carl has with you. Using this method of training, you want to have a dog that's committed to being working and being focused and bonded strongly to its owner. Using this method of training, what do you notice or about the dog's state of mind, about the bond that they have with their owner, about their ability to take initiative and make good decisions and so forth? And what do you notice in that area?
The beauty of this is that it gives the dog more latitude than it would have had in the old days. You are actually giving it power to make good decisions, and the game just builds a bond. He thinks he's playing. I mean, after all, he's certainly doing me a great deal of good work and doing me a tremendous favor by successfully achieving the goals that I've set for him to achieve. But in his head, it's a game. So anytime you can get a dog to play games with you, that dog's going to bond to you because you become the fun person. You know, we have a problem, I think, we have a problem in many pet owners in that they'll just go out and buy one of these clickers and think it's a remote. Well, if I just point it at my dog Fido and click it and yell, then Fido will do whatever I yell at him to do. And that's not how it works.
Yeah, it's not a secret sound.
Right. Yeah. Right. We'll talk about how the game actually is played, and then some of the foundation behaviors. I want to mention in the Karen Pryor Academy, this is a particular school of training that has some foundations in marine mammal training. It's science-based. It's based upon how all animals, all people actually learn. And so we'll talk about how is this game played. You have a clicker there, and it's not a remote. How do you, when you're starting out with the dog, how do you start playing this game with a clicker?
Well, you have to induce the behavior. So
you get the behavior first.
I'm sorry?
You get the behavior first that you want, yeah.
Yes, you have to induce the behavior. So let's assume that we want the dog to find well, this is a really weird thing to target, but it's crucial for a blind person. Let's say we want that dog to find the sink in a bathroom. And
pretty important.
You're thinking, it is huge because there's no standard design. And if
you don't want to be
bathroom in an
wandering
airport,
around.
Yeah.
You don't want to be wandering around the restroom touching everything.
You don't, because that could get you, 6 kinds of ugly trouble. So what you would do in a case like this, to make this a game, you would bring the dog to the sink and put the back of your hand on it and say to the dog, touch. And he would then reach his nose up and touch the front of your hand because the back of your hand is on that sink. The minute you get that touch response, the minute that nose touches your hand, you fire that clicker and you fire off a food reward. Then you do verbal praise. So it's a 3-step formula, and they're all really rapid succession.
But they're distinct. Each one happens at its own point in time. It's
correct.
Touch, click, and
praise.
Then you move.
Or food
and praise and all
right.
that sort of stuff. But the click and the food happen at distinct times.
Yes.
Immediately,
yes.
but also not just at the same time.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The click happens first when you get the desired result, and then the food happens immediately thereafter.
Yeah, if someone moves their hand before they click, the dog's going to pay attention to their hand moving to where the food is rather than paying attention to the click.
That's exactly correct. That's a brilliant insight, and you're absolutely right about that. You have to be very careful that you do it in that order. Otherwise, you accomplish nothing. So you do this for, let's say, 10 or 12 times. Touch, touch, touch. And the minute you get the touch, click, food. And then verbal praise. Again, you repeat that numerous times. Now on about iteration number 10 or 11, and it varies from dog to dog. Carl's predecessor, I used to joke, was a one-click dog because he'd get it in a heartbeat. With Carl, it takes a few more reps. That's all right. He gets there. So Now we've done it several times. Now we're going to introduce the name of that object. We're going to call it sink. And so we would say, touch sink. And the minute the nose hits your hand, which your hand's on the back of that sink, the minute that nose hits it, same process. Click, feed, praise. Touch sink, click, feed, praise. And you do that several times, multiple iterations of that. Now, the final step is we back up a few feet, initially maybe only 8 or 10 inches. And you take the harness in your left hand and say, show me the sink, or find the sink. And if the dog moves forward and places its nose on the sink and you follow the nose with your other hand, that's when you hit that clicker and do the food, reward, and praise. And that process is called back chaining, because we're going backwards. We're going farther and farther away from the target. Eventually, what you want to get is a circumstance in which you're 2 or 3 feet away from that target or more, and say to the dog, show me the sink. And if he goes and if he can visually see the sink and then walks to it and touches it, you've succeeded. From that point on, you won't need that clicker any longer, because the next time you go into that bathroom and say, show me the sink, boom, he's gonna be right there. At that point, the human voice is going to be good enough, and you say the word yes, which is a signal to him that says, aha, food reward coming after the word yes, I got that. So that's kind of how it's played, and it's remarkably effective. You'd be blown away by how effective it can be. I've taught Carl to find empty chairs in meeting rooms. That's harder work, because all chairs look the same, and so you have to help him differentiate the empty ones. And that takes a little time.
Yeah, and you also you have him find a bus stop, a general bus stop for you, but you also have him find number 8.
That's
and
right.
He knows where that 8
he can find that specific one.
Mm-hmm. And you even have people wondering, they're mystified by how this all happens, but there are steps in training to get there, and part of, whoops, there goes my mic. Am I still on? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're here.
Anyway, part of that is teaching a targeting behavior, and this in modern dog training is one of the first behaviors you teach even pet dog owners. You know, you hold out your hand and you say, you know, and if you hold your hand in front of a dog's nose, they're going to be curious. They're going to touch it with their nose,
right.
And then you fire the clicker, and then produce food. And then when they are doing that behavior, then the way the sequence generally works in kind of the formal type of training is it's new cue, old cue behavior. So you say, once the dog is reliably touching your hand, you would say touch, present your hand, the dog touches it, fire the clicker, then food reward, and that's the way that goes. And then back chaining is you start with the last part of the behavior in the sequence, and the behavior before that, and behavior before that. And then maybe you're building distance, so your dog is taking you a sink from across the room or an empty chair from across the room.
Correct.
You know, and you're succeeding at first from 8 inches away, and then you're 8 or 18 feet away.
That's right.
Yeah.
If it's in his visual field, yes.
Yeah. And you're also, this is this very same way, this touch cue is used to teach the names of things.
Yes.
Touch such and such, and at some point, you know, you have your hand in front of, you know, if I say, you know, pin, touch, and I've got the pin there, and my hand is in front of the dog, will orient toward my hand, but then I can hold the pin separately, and then the dog will then, you know, I'll click and reward the dog for touching only the pin rather than my hand, and then I might put the pin down on the table, and the dog will orient toward the pin, you know, and that kind of thing.
One of the things they teach at the school that is super valuable if you're a blind person is, and it is just the touch command. So you hold both hands out in a fist like this so that they're doubled.
Right.
And say to the dog, touch. And wherever he is, even if he's 20, 30, 40 feet away, if he can hear you, the goal is to get him to come to that double fist and touch it. And oh gosh, if you can achieve that, you've accomplished great things, because your dog's not always going to be in harness, and there may be instances when, in fact, he's going to be off doing something silly or whatever,
Yeah.
or maybe not doing something silly, but just away, and you need him. And that touch command works wonders, because it's one of the most important ones they teach.
And,
Is there? I was going to ask a question. Is there something that he does that is not just showing you things? Does he do things for you?
Well, certainly he's taught to stop at curbs and stairs, always to stop before he goes up or down any of those. And that's an indicator from him that says we are about to change our elevation here, and it's better to walk down it than to fall. So he
Right.
will stop at those items, those places. And the same is true with any intersection. He does not have the ability to know when the light has changed, but he does have the ability to stop and let you make that decision. And really, these guys understand forward, right, and left, and that's the basic piece. And so yeah, there are things that he does.
and
How about
Some-
protection features?
Go ahead.
How about protection? Will he? So you're
No.
walking down through Columbus, and some
No.
guys. No.
They don't breed them or train them for that kind of thing.
that's a whole separate
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
separate
I wasn't
deal.
sure if there was
Yeah,
any
right.
overlap
Yeah.
or
No.
I mean, they steer you away from people that might collide with you. But I want to
That's correct. That's correct.
talk a little bit about teaching stopping at curbs and so forth. What happens is a dog has come to understand a halt cue, and so you take the dog to a curb and you say halt,
Actually, the schools nowadays use just the clicker.
just a clicker.
Yeah, they get it
Okay.
to that curb and click it.
Oh, and the dog, you stop the
Stops.
dog at the curb.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is the curb becomes the cue for stop.
It does.
And then so instead of giving a physical sort of guidance to stop, you fade that out, and when the dog stops, you click and reward.
Correct.
And if you need to
Correct.
repeat, then you make that, you do that in some way that's obvious for the dog and more likely to
Yeah.
succeed.
Yes.
So, and I want to mention that this kind of training is used for training all kinds. It's used for training military dogs. It's
Oh yeah.
used for training dolphins who go out and place listening devices on submarines of other armed services and so forth. It's used for training assistance behaviors like bracing, so someone with an orthopedic problem can stand up, or helping them with socks, or targeting a light switch to turn it on or turn it off. And basically,
Yeah.
a dog can use its mouth, its nose, its or its paws. And all of those have cues that when you get the behavior, the dog gives a paw, then that becomes paw, touches with the nose, take it becomes with the mouth, and so forth. And when you build all these behaviors, you get, and using back chaining and the touch command and those kinds of things, you get incredible results. And they're all from the same foundation.
Yes, that's correct. And I know people who have taught their dog to go to the fridge and get something out of it and bring it back to them. And I've not done that. I'm a little concerned about the consequences, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there are people who do it and who are successful. And
Yeah, I taught my dog to open the refrigerator door, and then I
Sure.
realized, oh no, I've taught my dog to open
Yeah,
the
that's
refrigerator
what
door.
I did.
Yeah, right.
That's where the bone, one of the doors where the bones were. He
Yeah,
can treat
right.
himself.
it's a cool trick, but
Yeah.
at some point you're
I taught him how to open the front door, and then I had to put a lock very high up.
And I think
Exactly.
these dogs learn, their learning ability improves by this kind of training method. I think your
It
dog
does.
had figured out how to operate the automatic window in your car, and then you had to use
He
the child
does.
lock.
He constantly rolls down his window in the vehicle. He's yeah. I want a little air, so he reaches that paw out there, and just that window's going down. And we have not taught him how to roll it up. He can't quite grasp the idea of lifting the button. But
Right, which is a paw behavior. You could teach that if
It certainly
you're so
we could,
inclined.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, Nolan,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And I hope people are very inspired to understand what service dogs do and how they're trained, and that they can use some of these same methods to work with their pet dogs and get
Just whatever behavior
whatever
you're looking
behavior
for.
you're looking for. Exactly.
Yep.
Well, so thank you so much.
thank
I
you.
look
It's been a
forward to
pleasure.
coming
I've
up and
enjoyed
meeting
this.
your dog, Carl, up there at OSU one day.
Yeah, I'd love that. We'll look forward to that.
Okay, super.
Thanks.
Thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure to be here.
Okay.
Thanks for
again.
watching, everyone.